What's up, Falcons fans, and welcome to episode 26 of Talking Birdie, an Atlanta Falcons podcast powered by SportsTalkATL.com. I am your host, Matt Karoly. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Karoly, Karoly spelled Karoly, and I'm joined as usual by my one co-host, Jake Gordon. You can find him on Twitter at Can't Guard Jake. And Jake, it's been a great week, I'd say, to be an Atlanta sports fan. Where does it rank for you? I mean, the Braves obviously exercised some demons. They're on their way to the World Series, first time since '99. We got a little Falcons winning streak, which it's only 2 games, but the way things have gone lately, I mean, beggars can't be choosers. And obviously the Hawks starting a very exciting season, an exciting season that I think we hope ends maybe a little bit further than it did last year. So where does this rank this past week for you as an Atlanta sports fan?
It still hasn't really hit me. I don't know if it will hit me until the first pitch tomorrow, but job's not finished. Still got 4 games to win.
That's right.
I don't want to come all the way here to lose. So that's my main thing. I just want to make sure they win it. I'll be in a very, very different mood one way or the other next week.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we know as Falcons fans, the NFC title game in 2016 was great, but they didn't ultimately finish the job and left a bittersweet taste in the mouth. So hopefully the Braves can kind of right those wrongs and, finish the job. And I know everyone's going to be pulling for them outside of probably Houston just because of the fact that Astros are cheating dirtbags. And I think, once a cheater, always a cheater, even if, they're back in the World Series after all of that has been let out. I think everyone's hopefully going to be pulling for the Braves. So, yeah, hopefully it's a fun series. Hopefully they can take care of it. But we're here to talk Falcons. We're coming to you a little bit earlier this week because of the World Series starting on Tuesday, which is our normal recording day. And I think the Falcons got the memo because typically we don't get roster news on Mondays. Typically it's Tuesday, but we did get some roster news. So let's start there. Kaleb McGary was activated from the COVID list, and he's going to take TJ Green's spot on the roster, which a little surprising, but maybe not so because of how TJ has played. And, he was infamously the guy that gave up that touchdown in the Washington game that ultimately lost them the game. My question to you, though, Jake, is how short of a leash maybe does Kaleb McGary now have? Seeing what we saw, I thought pretty impressive fill-in by Jason Spriggs. I mean, obviously the play calling Arthur Smith helped them out quite a bit. You saw Lee Smith attached, next to him on the offensive line as a 6th offensive lineman. So that helped, but I was pleasantly surprised with him. How short of a leash does this make Kaleb McGary now that he's probably going to be, the starter, of course, but he hasn't played well. We've kind of talked about it a lot. So, is there a short leash now, you think, with him at right tackle?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't really know, but Spriggs, the offensive line as a whole played well, but he still had his moments. He got whipped on that Javon Holland sack. He was completely lost out there. But, other than that, the offensive line as a whole had a good game. And I assume they're going to play McGary, but it's one of those things to where I don't know if you try to fix something that isn't broke. But of course, McGary played against the Jets. I don't know. Those are 2 teams that don't have incredible pass rushes, especially with the Jets missing Carl Lawson. So I think you put your best foot forward and you go McGary. But I think his leash was already kind of short before this whole thing. So I guess we'll see. But hopefully he plays well and we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, no, I think that last point, especially true. I mean, yeah, he's been one of the bigger disappointments. And again, the offensive line has steadily, been trending in the right direction, even when he was in the lineup. So again, you hope he kind of, with this COVID situation, and obviously who knows what happened in the off season for him missing time and getting off to a slow start. But, he's not going to get many more chances. He's going to be, they're going to have that decision on the 5th-year option coming up in May. And I don't think any of us expect that to get picked up. But look, his back's against the wall. I feel like if he wants to remain in Atlanta or even, kind of find a home and find a place in the NFL as a starter, it's put up or shut up time for him when he returns now this coming week. Another roster move. Again, I talked about TJ Green being released. They had looked into Luther Kirk, safety. Don't really have much to offer, with him, but they did eventually sign him to the practice squad. And Elliott Fry has now been released for the millionth time. With the TJ, let's talk a little bit about the TJ Green release, because this was a guy that was the cornerback 3 up until late in the game on Sunday. He was eventually replaced by Chris Williamson. Complicating matters, Atlanta lost A.J. Terrell. He was knocked out of the game with a neck injury. They lost Eric Harris to an arm injury, after kind of missing a tackle on Tua Tagovailoa for, a third down run. And then also, Fabian Moreau exited the game for one play. And, there was only one play after that point with that go-ahead touchdown that Miami had to take a 28-27 lead. So a lot of injuries in the secondary room. And that, it's probably why Luther Kirk's signing was necessary. But to let go of TJ Green when you have all these injuries, it makes me feel like the injuries to Terrell and Moreau, and I guess it's not as relevant because he's a safety, but even Eric Harris might not be as serious. Do you get that same vibe too, or were you shocked by the TJ Green release? Talk to me about your thoughts there.
Yeah, I would say I was pretty shocked by it. You're talking about a position group where you just don't really have a lot right now, especially with Isaiah Oliver hurt. But maybe that means they want to see more of Richie Grant, or maybe even Chris Williamson. I don't know. But I definitely didn't expect that.
Yeah, and I think with Williamson, one of the surprise for me, and I guess we can kind of lead this conversation into the things we liked, things we didn't like from the victory on Sunday against Miami. And I'm going to start with one of the things I didn't like, because again, I'm talking about Chris Williamson here. I was shocked that Chris Williamson got the start at nickel cornerback. He played that first drive, did not have a fun time of it going up against Jaylen Waddle, which didn't come as a surprise to me and shouldn't to anybody. I mean, you're talking about a guy 6th overall pick versus a kind of a journeyman undrafted type of player. Or I think he was a 7th round pick of the Giants a year or two ago, but that's besides the point. So, again, Williamson, we talked about him in the offseason. I mean, he flashed and he was kind of one of the surprises left off the roster. We thought he earned it over. Well, Alex would disagree about TJ Green earning it over TJ Green, but we thought he carved out a role for himself based on his playing time, based on the play itself. But certainly not a great first impression in my mind. But I guess the coaching staff, like you said, maybe wants to take a longer look at it. With him, there's also some of the younger guys. I mean, Richie Grant then came in the game on the second series and filled in at nickel cornerback. And we saw Darren Hall for one snap, when Moreau exited. But that was one of the things I didn't like was seeing Chris Williamson. I don't know how of an expanded role he's going to continue to have. I mean, there's also Kendall Sheffield out there, who was a healthy scratch this past week's game, and maybe now one of the things that was rattling around in my brain is that he missed significant amount of time. Maybe he wasn't in playing shape for the first couple weeks off activation, and now maybe he is, so that he can play on defense. But so yeah, that was one of the things I didn't like. And again, the cornerback room, secondary position group as a whole is definitely something to keep an eye on, especially with these injuries, something to monitor throughout the week. But let's before we go through more things we didn't like, let's flip it back to the things we did like, because I think there was a lot of things. And I feel like we have to start this conversation with Kyle Pitts, right? I mean, we saw the breakout game officially, I think, in London, and now he's really starting to assert himself in this league, and his stars continuing to shine. Talk to me about his performance. A lot of records he shattered. If you want to shout some of those out, feel free. But talk to me about Kyle Pitts and what you saw from him and what you like moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I'm not an NFL head coach, but it turns out get the ball to 8, which I've been screaming for the first 4 weeks. Yeah. It turns out it's actually pretty.
Yeah.
So, okay. You have the record, the most yards for a tight end through the first 6 games for a rookie. First rookie tight end over the past 50 years to have back-to-back 100-yard games. And most importantly, he's opening up the offense. Matt Ryan's finding him downfield, and he's delivering really, really good passes. And he's keeping defenses on their toes. That you can't just suffocate this Falcons defense this Falcons offense that's going to try to dink and dunk every single play, Because Kyle Pitts, I mean, he's the threat. You saw him go one-on-one with Eric Rowe. Eric Rowe's got one of his arms held, and he still comes up with a circus catch. And if he didn't, it's a PI. So just what he brings to the Falcons offense in terms of just being that threat, I think we talked about this a lot. With trying to replace Julio Jones, it's pretty much impossible. But Kyle Pitts is looking like the part right now.
Yeah, no, I was shouting that from the rooftops. Your last point about Julio Jones, and the Falcons were eventually going to have to replace Matt Ryan, Julio Jones at some point, and whether who came first, I think a lot of people probably put the odds on Matt Ryan. We were throwing a curveball with Julio Jones wanting out. So with that being said, you had to replace him in the offense. He was such a fixture over the last 10 years that losing him, there was going to be a drop off in production. And it just so happens, Falcons don't always have the best luck, but I think this year with the draft they did, finding a unicorn, finding a guy as freakish as Julio Jones is in Kyle Pitts that you can just kind of sub in there. And yes, he's a rookie, and yes, usually rookie tight ends take longer than most positions to develop. But again, I think it's a huge disservice calling this guy a tight end because we're seeing, all of his production, all of the big plays came when he was split out wider in the slot. He's not a tight end. They're going to call him a tight end because we live in a society where you got to categorize individuals, but he's more than that. And going into this matchup, we talked last week about some of the injuries to monitor with Xavier Howard and Byron Jones missing the previous week. And, when those guys are out, Miami can't really go to man-to-man coverage. And it actually was kind of a hindrance to them that they were back in the lineup, because then they went back to their man-to-man coverage principles. And that played right into Kyle Pitts' hands and right into the Falcons' hands, because again, anytime Matt saw them in man-to-man coverage, anytime Kyle noted, like, he was surprised at how often he was getting, manned up one-on-one. And, you're going to take that matchup. And the fact that Matt now, you're only in game 6 and he has the confidence to go to him, and, Kyle's, he's rewarding him. Matt's throwing great balls, as you noted. He was in his bag yesterday with some of those dimes, dropping it in the bucket. Even on his back foot, that one on the game-winning drive, Matt, the fundamentals of the throw, like, if you look at it, he's like fading away, and Matt's he tossed a brilliant ball still. Like, he didn't even get to step up in it. So it's poetry to watch. And again, this is why I think we were all excited that Kyle Pitts was an Atlanta Falcon. So again, the expectation is more performances like that from him. Obviously, teams are going to, maybe not go man-to-man as much, and obviously going to try to definitely shade a corner and play more too high, or shade at safety and play more too high. But hopefully that opens things up for other players. Hint, hint, Calvin Ridley, which I guess, again, turning it back to one of the things I didn't like, again, and I'm going to be positive, trust me, people. But again, it's just a great segue. One of the things I didn't like as well is they're still running the wrong route concepts for Calvin Ridley. They're still running those, over the middle. He's not really getting a chance to just break down his defender one-on-one. They're running some corners. Like, they ran a corner on the one play call that Pitts had that great one-handed catch at the end of the first half. Calvin ran a corner route on the opposite side of the field. Matt just went to where the coverage dictated. But you look at the over the middle shots that Calvin just couldn't come down with, or that fluky interception that, again, Calvin, anytime he has to 50-50 a ball, it doesn't lead to good things. So I'm hoping that changes. Again, we're through 5 games with Calvin Ridley as a wide receiver in Arthur Smith's scheme, and so far, it hasn't been great, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change. But that's the one thing that really needs. It's the only thing really. Other than, I'd say, the run game too not being a strength, which is another thing that I wasn't particularly happy with. They got the job done on the final drive. Being able to bleed the clock and set up for Younghoe Koo's game-winning field goal. But all in all, the run game still hasn't been the strength that we hoped it to be. And, I can toss out some stats. As far as on the season goes, Cordarrelle Patterson leads the team with a 44% success rate. That's kind of, That's a little bit above average, I think, in terms of the norm in the NFL, but it's still not great. Mike Davis is at 38% and Wayne Gallman's at 25%. These are all per Sharp Football Stats. But I think also another one that's a little surprising, per Next Gen Stats, their rushing yards over expectation. So this is really what's kind of measuring a running back's ability to just get the yards that they're supposed to get or exceed it. Mike Davis is third worst at negative 60 rushing yards over expectation, and Cordell Patterson's at negative 10, which is still below average. But you can't always judge some of these players on a stat sheet, and there is some pretty good running backs near the bottom of the list. DeAndre Swift, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, all hovering near the bottom. All have negative 30 plus rushing yards over expectation. So I'm a little surprised, and I think I take that with a grain of salt, but something's not quite right. And again, whether you want to place it on the blocking, this stat itself is placing it on the running back. So that's the thing that's a little confusing. But I mean, the point remains, I still think outside of that Philly game, we really haven't seen, a strong rushing performance, from the Falcons. All right, let's go back to, or do you want to add anything on that, or anything maybe you want to throw out that you didn't like before we return and kind of close this Miami game with more things that we did like? Because there was a lot that I think we should still talk about there.
Yeah, it's. I talked about this on Twitter. I was like, we made such a big deal out of the Falcons coming out of the preseason with pretty much zero injuries if you don't count anything in camp, and they're starting to get dinged up throughout the season, and mainly, you hope everybody's okay, obviously. But AJ Terrell is obviously the biggest concern with a second head injury in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. That's very concerning. So hopefully he's good to go.
Yeah, and again, I'm hoping the release of TJ Green, and we'll get more information on Wednesday when kind of Smith updates everyone on it. And I would expect Terrell to be somewhat limited in practice with the hope that they're just saving him, for the game. But yeah, that's a big one. That was one of the biggest negatives, because he's continuing to shut down his side of the field, continue to look really strong. I mean, I think it helped that he was playing on, the right side of the field, and Tua being a lefty, you saw him always going to that left side. But even before that, we're seeing quarterbacks shy away from Terrell because, he really has been that lockdown corner that we hope for. So yeah, the only thing you can say negative about AJ Terrell right now is just stay healthy, kind of clean up your tackling for him, because that's put him in positions, at least with this second injury, that put him in the position that he was in, to get nicked up. The first injury occurred by him just making a ridiculous leaping pass deflection. But we need him. The Falcons don't have many defensive playmakers. He's one of them. So hopefully, it's not too severe and he can get back for this Carolina game. But yeah, going back to the things, let me shout out something that I did like, because again, been pretty negative thus far. We touched on it a little bit, but the pass protection, it's been, leaps and bounds better, over the last several weeks. Them and the Dallas Cowboys are allowing the least amount of sacks. And, sacks are sometimes, you got to prop up the quarterback, or it's, or in some cases, criticize the quarterback because it could be on them. But, Matt Ryan's always, it's been an underrated trait of his, navigating the pocket, knowing when to step up, knowing when to, evade the pocket. So he deserves some credit for it. But I do think this unit has been by and large much, much better. And, when you got, your backup right tackle, a guy who was on the street up until August, that you're slotting in there, and he was probably their fourth or fifth option coming into the season when you got guys like Matt Gano hurt in the preseason. When you got them in there and you're still being able to run your offense and have success, I think, the coaching staff deserves a lot of credit. Arthur Smith deserves credit for his play calling, but also, shout out to Dwayne Ledford, a guy that we've kind of, pumped up on the show in the off season, for getting these guys right. Again, they're by no means perfect. Jalen Mayfield continues, to not still be a below average player at his position, but definitely growing, and there's definitely more potential there. So again, I think the pass protection deserves a lot of credit. Matt Ryan only being sacked 9 times. I think if someone told us Matt would only be sacked 9 times after the first 6 games, I think we'd all ask where to sign. So that's definitely something that I liked as well. One other thing, forcing some turnovers. It took them until that 5th game to get their first with Jaylen Hawkins, and now maybe we should call him Jalen Ball Hawkins because he got his second one in back-to-back weeks. Made a nice heady play, kind of read to his eyes, saw where he was going, and kind of went out and got the ball. And especially where in the field that they got the turnover. I think Miami's in the red zone, and when you can kind of make that stand in the red zone and get an interception, kind of it was a 6-point swing because the Falcons then went down, were able to kick a last second field goal in the first half. So him, and then Foyoluakan, man, that was probably a game-saving play. Would you agree? I mean, Calvin Ridley, you thought the momentum was slipping away. We were all like, oh no, here we go again. Calvin, mishandles the pass. Xavier Howard makes a ridiculous play to get the interception, and you're like, all right, Miami's gonna win this game. And no, next play, Grady Jarrett, got to give him credit because he made the pressure to force Tua into a mistake, and Foyoluakan was the recipient there, and kind of took it back deep into Miami territory. But definitely want to see more of that because again, this is a unit that's very much bending and a lot of times breaking. But if you can take the football away and be opportunistic and give it back to an offense that's finding its footing, that's really all we can ask of this defense. Anything you want to add on those 2 points, or maybe add in something else of your own that you like to close out this Miami game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so pleased with the emergence of Jaylen Hawkins, man. He really was an afterthought this offseason. It was all about Richie Grant. Nobody ever really talked about Jaylen Hawkins. I didn't talk about Jaylen Hawkins. And he is PFF's second highest graded safety in the entire NFL, second highest graded player on the defense for the Falcons. Like I said, PFF grades aren't a tell-all. But he's had 2 interceptions, and especially that interception against the Jets, man. It was an incredible break on the ball. And he looks to be a viable piece of the defense going forward, which is something we really didn't expect this year. And that's been a very pleasant surprise, and hopefully he can keep it up.
Yeah, no, you're right. We really hadn't talked about him. And then you brought him up a couple shows ago when we had everyone on and talked about how much of a surprise he was. And, you're exactly right. I mean, he's been a pleasant surprise. Probably you'd say the biggest surprise on the defensive side of the ball. Because again, he was that 4th guy going in, but then in the preseason, we did see him as the 3rd guy and, made plays there. And now he's actually carrying it forward into real NFL regular season games. And you got to think he's making it hard on this coaching staff to like, hey, yeah, I know we got 2 veterans here, Eric Harris and Daron Harmon, but guy continues to make plays. And, I hope you see more of him. You hope his snaps keep going up, and it's not just because of an injury. I mean, the last 2 weeks, it's been because of injuries for the most part. And, prior to injuries, he's hovering in that 20% range, but he needs to start getting snaps, in the plus 50% range, if not higher. So yeah, shout out to him. And, again, just talking long-term vision with Jaylen Hawkins, Falcons need contributors that are on their rookie contracts that, are getting paid, close to the minimum. And Jaylen Hawkins fits that bill right now. I mean, he's only in his 2nd year. He'd have 2 more years under contract. And if you can get, hopefully Richie Grant continues to acclimate himself to this scheme and to the NFL. If you can get both of those guys to be starter caliber as early as next year, that's huge, because that's one less box you really have to worry about checking off when it comes to the draft and free agency. And I think we touched on last week's show, free agency is going to be a struggle again next year, despite the cap going up a little bit. It's still going to be, they're not going to be major players. It won't be until 2023. So if you don't have to worry about safety necessarily, and you can maybe just focus in the secondary on that cornerback 2 opposite AJ Terrell, that's big time. So hopefully we continue to get this type of play from Jaylen Hawkins moving forward.
Real quick too, unless you have anything left, before we move to
No,
Carolina,
no, go ahead.
I want to talk about that article I wrote about today. I mean, it was PFF's article, but they had the 2 trade hypos. I want to get your thoughts on those.
Yeah, let's do it.
The first one, it'll be pretty quick. It was Hurst and a 6th this year for a 5th this year to Cincinnati.
Yeah. I think we talked about Hurst, and he'd certainly be the guy I'd consider probably most of the names that have been thrown out and the other names on PFF's article. Not in love with the return. You're essentially just moving up, earlier in the draft, but I think we saw a very similar trade go down today with the Broncos and
Kenny
the Rams. That essentially, Kenny Young's going to Denver, and it's essentially a same exact trade. I think the draft picks maybe are in 2024 though.
2024, yeah.
Yeah. So, but they're just moving up in the draft, and they're giving up a player. And, the reason the Rams are doing that, it's all salary cap driven. The draft compensation isn't, sure, it's great to move up a little bit, but Rams pressed up against the cap. You're saving $1 million or $2 million by, dumping a player like that. That's essentially what the Falcons would be doing if they were to make this trade. And that, I guess that matters because you can roll over cap space. And, again, we just got done talking about it. It's going to be tough sledding in free agency and on the salary cap next year. So I guess that matters, but I'd probably decline that offer just because to me, it's not sweet enough. Maybe you can get a 5th round pick by itself and not have to part with a 6th by just maybe waiting and letting Hurst get to free agency and you get a comp pick from it. Because again, we all know what the Falcons gave up for Hurst. And I know you're not going to get that back. You're not going to get a 2nd round pick back, but
not going to get J.K. Dobbins back.
Yeah, you're not going to get J.K. Dobbins back. So I would take the gamble of looking at the comp, the compensatory formula, because again, I don't think the Falcons are going to be big players in free agency. So, and that's usually what negates comp picks is if you sign a player and you let go of a player, it cancels itself out. So with that said, I would take the gamble there and decline a trade like that. But, again, Hurst would be the guy I'd shop. I just would hope to get at least like a 5th and not have to do any trading of other
I think
picks.
I'd even take a 6 straight up. If we got a 6 straight up, I'd say yeah. Go ahead. But
push comes to shove.
And then the second one was, I believe it was just Duron Harmon straight up for a 2023 6 that the Falcons may have gave.
I like that. I like that one more. I think
again,
we just got done talking. Yeah, honestly, maybe I forgot about that one because we just got done again talking about Jaylen Hawkins, and Falcons got some safeties, and they even have a veteran that's started a lot of games in Sean Williams on their practice squad. So that wouldn't be a huge loss. With Hayden Hurst, he is a viable weapon in this pass attack, especially with Calvin Ridley still slow and not hitting his form, and Russell Gage is just coming back. Hurst, despite he's one of the lowest graded tight ends in Pro Football Focus, despite all that, he's still a viable target for Matt Ryan in this offense. We know how much Arthur Smith loves 12 personnel with the 2 tight ends, and it would just be Lee Smith and, Kyle Pitts. I guess they would call it Parker Hess, or maybe that would be an opportunity to see Felipe Franks at tight end more. I'd be really intrigued by that because there's a potential that Franks, could be tight end 3 next year. They have him under contract for 3 years if they keep him on the roster, and chances are he's not going to be the backup quarterback we want him to be. So, maybe that's where the Hurst trade makes more sense. But yeah, I love that Harmon trade. I think I would take that right now if someone offered that. I was kind of shocked that you can get a 6th round pick for Duron Harmon. But Brad, I know Brad.
You can.
Well, I know Brad Spielberger. He's the guy that writes those articles, and he's a sharp dude. He knows what he's talking about. So I'm sure he's done his research on the history of trades and. I would take that.
Going back to that first one too, you talk about the Hurst one, talking about swapping a 6th for a 5th. Before the season, you talk about with the Bengals, it's like, oh hell yeah, Bengals, they're going to be picking like top 5.
Yeah, not anymore, right?
Not anymore.
That's Zach Taylor. Are you still off the Zach Taylor? Probably Joe
Oh, I mean,
Brady.
I never disliked Zach Taylor. Like, I never thought Zach
No,
Taylor
no,
was
I'm
going
not
to
saying
be
you
a head
did,
coach.
but now
Yeah.
you got to go in a different. Like, where's Joe Brady? If does Joe Brady does Joe Brady get a head coaching job anymore? I mean, we're
Well,
going to
this is
get into
perfect 'cause we're
Carolina
about
in a
to
little
talk.
bit.
Yeah, this is perfect. So I think he
Yeah,
will, just because
yeah,
somebody's going to be
and
looking
I
for the
don't
next
I
big
don't think
thing.
it's him based on the things I've seen from Carolina people. I don't think it's him. I think it's more the quarterback. We'll talk about it. But before we get into Carolina, there's one more trade scenario that I think you guys also wrote an article about, sportstalkatl.com. Had to do with Brandon Ayuk.
Oh yeah,
Let's talk about that, because that is very intriguing to me. And I'm not gonna say what I said in our group chat earlier, because again, don't want, maybe I'll save it for another time if it's more relevant. But I do like that idea for Atlanta. Now, again, we were just talking about Atlanta being sellers, and I do think, despite them continuing to win games, I don't think they'll ever be buyers. But if they were to be buyers, Brandon Ayuk's that type of player that I think we've been talking about that fits better in Arthur Smith's scheme as a receiver with his ability after the catch, right? I mean, talk to
yeah,
me.
and
Are we on the same page
yeah,
there, right?
I was the father of that article.
Yeah.
So here's my thing with it too. Brandon Ayuk, as a first round pick, if they choose to do so, has 3 more years of team control. When you
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
traditional buying at the trade deadline, you're talking about a guy that's going to hit free agency in the
Yep.
offseason. This is still a long-term investment. And you talk about, a third, a fourth, or a fifth round draft pick from the Falcons. They're probably going to use one of those on a receiver anyways, if not an earlier one. So I really don't hate it at all. And, Brandon Ayuk was really good last year. I don't know what's going on with him and Kyle Shanahan. That's my only reservation, is what's causing this tension here, because it's obviously not a talent thing.
Well, yeah, and we've seen it before with Kyle Shanahan, because Dante Pettis was a guy that I think a lot of draftniks were high on. I think he was a second round pick, not quite a first round pick, obviously, but and he just fell out of favor. And he's a very demanding coach, and we're seeing players get in his doghouse. I mean, maybe even Trey Lance to a degree. Is in his doghouse a little bit and not performing maybe up to the development that they wanted him to. I don't know, but that is a reservation. You'd obviously have to try to get intel and find out what you know.
I'm gonna say this very, 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 very quietly, but Kyle Shanahan might get fired this offseason, and Dan Quinn might get a head coaching job.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something that I certainly did not have on my radar of possibilities.
Think about Denver, like Denver.
With the way,
I mean, Kyle could be his OC again.
Oh man.
I mean,
well,
maybe
no,
Denver. I
was just thinking. I think. So, how do you think that plays out? Like Kyle gets
they're not going to
fired.
They're not going to fire. They're not going to fire Shanahan unless they lose like every game.
He would walk, right? Would he walk? Because what if the Denver opportunity was open and Kyle was like, "I want to be," because I think he would get a head coaching job again. I don't know if he'd ever. Like, I think he'd be in demand regardless.
I was sort of kidding about that part. Somebody else will hire him as head coach. Adam Gase got.
Well, I think Denver would. Where's Dad? I could see him just going right there then, and then potentially, think of this, like Aaron Rodgers and the 49ers almost had a thing going on, and we know Denver was connected to Aaron Rodgers. Kyle, I guess, made the dumb play and decided to roll with Jimmy G for another season, and then take the swing on the rookie quarterback. But he could see this as an opportunity, like, hey, let me right that wrong. Let me go to Denver where my dad coached, and let me get Aaron Rodgers, and that team's
Aaron
ready to
Rodgers
contend.
Or Matt Ryan.
Yeah. Wow. A couple weeks ago, yeah, sure. But now at this point,
yeah, probably not.
It's a different narrative.
It's fun to just joke about, but still, no, really, like that's that.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily
serious
off the
about
table.
the whole. Yeah, Shanahan get fired and Dan Quinn get another head coaching job in the same year. I don't think that's totally off the table.
Yeah, it's a shame Dan had to use Atlanta to learn some lessons, but it seems like it's working out for him right now in Dallas. And we'll certainly revisit this topic when they play the Cowboys in a couple of weeks. But let's, that's a couple weeks away. Let's talk about this Panthers matchup on Sunday. Panthers losers of 4 straight, certainly fading after that hot 3-0 start. But I think context says, look at who they played. They beat, the Jets. They beat the Texans, and they beat the Saints in week 2. Saints had a lot of guys out, a lot of coaches out. Sometimes these early season games kind of lie to us. I mean, I think we saw it a good deal in week 1 against the Eagles. I guess we should start the conversation at quarterback here. I mean, Sam Darnold has looked like the Jets' Sam Darnold, and maybe some people need to apologize a little bit to Adam Gase because he's kind of looked in that same mold that he looked in New York, and Matt Rule even benched him in favor of PJ Walker, but he did say post game that Sam's our starting quarterback. He will be next week and moving forward. But I don't know. There's all these Deshaun Watson rumors. We're kind of getting back-to-back weeks of the Deshaun Watson drama, caught up in it a little bit with Miami the week prior. And, Tua certainly did all that he could to will, the Dolphins to a victory. It was a little bit, it wasn't enough. My worry is the Falcons defense presents kind of a slump breaking scenario, kind of like, Tua threw for a career high 4 touchdown passes. What's your expectations, from the Panthers offense, in particular, Sam Darnold, this Sunday?
So there's just a lot of layers to this. So bear with me.
Yeah.
Number one, first and foremost, Christian McCaffrey is not there. I don't root for injuries. I'm not happy he's hurt, but that's big. That's very important.
Yeah, he's going to be out another 2 weeks, I believe. Yep.
Yeah, I'm on fantasy 2 weeks. But in both leagues.
Rough.
But yeah, sorry, Aaron. I know you're not listening. It's okay. But my thing is with Darnold too is, okay, yeah, we have the Jets, we have the Texans, where he had really good games against, and the Saints, which is a little good for next week, but we'll get to that eventually when we get to it. But other than that, I mean, he's still the same Sam Darnold. I might get old takes exposed on Twitter. I don't think this one is necessarily I was kind of kidding, but it was during the middle. I think it was the Thursday night game, so I guess it was Texans Panthers, and I tweeted out like that Sam Darnold 5-year extension is going to be something else or something like that. And yeah, no, that's not going to happen anymore.
Yeah.
But this could easily be a get right game for him. I don't like Sam Darnold to me is just like, he's just there. Like, I don't think he's like the worst quarterback in the league. I don't think he's the best. He's like a meaty 24th. He'll probably be a backup at some point. He'll probably be a backup from here on out. But that doesn't mean he can't come out against Atlanta's defense and have a get-right game, especially you talk about Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. There's still good players on this team. Tommy Trimble's look really good. They still got Chuba Hubbard. I think the key for Atlanta is just like it has been every week, is they're going to have to generate some kind of push up front.
Yeah, and I'm glad you just said that right there, because I know Trevor Sickam, a friend of the show, tweeted out, Pro Football Focus stat about pressures per drop back, and Carolina is one of the worst. Their offensive line is one of the worst. And again, I noted about it earlier when we were talking about the Falcons' protection and pressures on a quarterback. Sometimes quarterbacks can invite it, and I think that to a degree is the case in Carolina a bit with Sam Darnold. But I do also think this offensive line is not well built outside of Taylor Moton. They had Brady Christensen, a guy that I think we both kind of like. We did talk about him when we were talking about the draft. I know Alex was a fan. He got his first start at left tackle, kid from BYU. Shorter arms. He had a rough go of it against Azeez Ojulari.
Go Dogs.
I don't know if Cam Irving's going to be back. He was out with an illness. But in either case, I mean, that's an area ripe for the taking. You got Matt Paredes, center, kind of, not the same center he was in Denver. And I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head who the 2 guards are, but I know they're not. I think John Miller might be one.
I think Michael Jordan's one. The other one, I think it's John Miller and Michael Jordan.
The old Bengals player, right? Or
yeah,
just a guy that's
a
journeyman.
He wasn't good enough for the Bengals or the Giants offensive line. Oh wait, that was Billy Price. Sorry, he wasn't good enough for the Bengals offensive line.
And that tells you all you need to know there. So again, it feels like we're repeating ourselves from the last week's show, but it's an opportunity. Falcons pass rush really, again, left a lot to be desired, left a lot of meat on the bones. It had its moments. Grady Jarrett flashed. This could be a huge Grady Jarrett game. And again, he's really only had that one, I'd say, against New York when he really took advantage of Ben Bredesen. This could be another opportunity for him. Grady usually does well against Carolina. So that's something to watch out for because, again, you're right. They do have the talent on the outside. I mean, they don't have the talent in the backfield anymore with CMC out. But DJ Moore is as good a receiver as any. You know, Robbie Anderson can take the top off a defense. Not really sure lately, Terrace Marshall, if he's really found.
I was actually just about to talk about him. I don't think he played last week, and I don't think he played the week before. He is like bad right now, which really surprised me because I thought he was a great pick for them, and I thought he was going to be really good coming out of this draft. But he's been kind of smelly, not good. But
interesting.
It is the Falcons.
Do they still have who's that other guy? Zylstra, or did he get hurt? Brandon Zylstra. I feel like I saw him. I think he got hurt. He was like their slot receiver. Looks like they got Alex Erickson, who I think he was another similar like slot receiver.
Yeah, it looks like he has Zylstra. It looks like he has about 100 snaps this year, so there's no way he's at full strength.
Yeah, but you know they got Tommy Tremble, who's a guy after the Dan Arnold trade. I think they like what they have in him. I was always been a big fan of him. So he's a weapon that potentially, we saw Falcons definitely struggle with Mike Gesicki kind of as we expected. Tremble could be a sleeper to keep an eye on. Moving to the other side of the ball, I think this defense is still like a pretty legitimate good defense. It's just that their offense now has put them behind the 8 ball way too much. And obviously they can't shoulder the load for both units. Potentially something to watch for Stefan Gilmore, who I think we should talk a little bit too about the Panthers and some of their decision making, given where their trajectory is right now. But they've gone all in. They went out and got Stefan Gilmore, who is reportedly expected to make his Panthers debut. Not great timing from the Falcons standpoint. I think this is potential. Like, what concerns me about this game is that the defense, the Panthers defense, shows what they've shown to this point and, are really a stingy kind of unit and can mix up their blitzes and, confuse this young Falcons offensive line. And they keep this game like low scoring and close. That's what worries me. Because again, I think the Sam Darnold we've seen from the last 4 weeks is probably more or less the Sam Darnold you're going to see going forward. I don't think he's going to be. Now, again, it's the Falcons defense. And, it could be a slump breaker, but like, I don't think they're going to score 30 points. I don't think it's going to be like a 30-14 game. I think where and when I say 30-14, like Panthers 30, Falcons 14, where the Panthers win this game is if it's like a 17-14 game, kind of like that New York game almost, where the New York, Falcons offense couldn't get off the ground. Thankfully, the defense was able to hold its own, and Falcons had the ball less. Like, that's what concerns me about this matchup. Are you with me on that, or do you think? Like, what do you think of the Panthers defense? I guess. Do you think they're good, or again, was it a product of who they were playing early on, and maybe they're not as good? I mean, I know the Giants did score 25 points.
I thought they were good last year. I think they got some nice pieces, but there's just some guys who haven't shown up this year. I think Yatir Gross-Matos has been hurt. Brian Burns has undoubtedly been the biggest disappointment for them, but I still love him as a player, and he's a guy you definitely have to account for. I don't think Hassan Reddick has really earned his check yet, but I think he's improving at least. One of my guys in the draft, Davion Nixon, I think has played fairly well and limited action. But we haven't seen the big step forward from guys like Jeremy Chin, from Dante Jackson. J.C. Horn's been good for a rookie. CJ Henderson is still not good. I don't know why people thought him magically being traded to Carolina would just make him magically not terrible. But other than that, we're not talking about, a bunch of scrubs out there. I just think they're kind of underperforming so far.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the strength, just looking at this unit, is probably their corners. And again, I mean, Stefan Gilmore would be a big X factor. And certainly would be interested to see. I mean, maybe I guess they'd lean Jeremy Chin. Either way, Jeremy Chin versus Kyle Pitts or Stefan Gilmore versus Kyle Pitts. That's must-see TV and could really go a long way in determining the matchup. I think Keith Taylor has been a guy, again, following some Panthers people, following Billy, who was on the show with us when we were, breaking down the Panthers in the offseason. He's posted some clips, talked highly of Keith Taylor, 5th round pick this year, kind of a guy wasn't on my radar at all. Shown the chops to be a pretty good outside cornerback in this league in the early going. So, having him, Dante Jackson, and then if you get Stefan Gilmore here in this week 8 matchup, that's a pretty good, 3-headed monster that, again, where this game gets dicey is, if the defense, if the pass coverage can hold the Falcons in check and keep this close, then keep Sam Darnold hanging around to the point where I think eventually, he'll have some success. I don't think we're going to shut him down completely. It would be a great step in the right direction, great litmus test to say like, hey, all right, we finally took advantage of a matchup that we should, like other teams have lately. But I do think they'll get theirs, and that's what concerns me. Where the Falcons could run away with this if you have a similar offensive output that you had the last couple of weeks. And on the flip side, like I said, 30-14 Carolina versus Atlanta, I don't see happening. I could potentially see it from the Falcons if, again, they take care of what they've taken care of the last couple of weeks, and Kyle Pitts is still a monster. And again,
I think
there's untapped potential still with this offense when you consider Calvin Ridley hasn't, gotten off the ground yet.
I think it's just up to them to capitalize on turnovers. Sam Darnold's going to make mistakes, and you got to take advantage of them. He's fumbled 1, 2, 4, 5 times this year. He's thrown 5 interceptions in just the past 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Actually, that's 7 in the past 4 weeks. You just got to take advantage of that type of stuff. And if you don't, you deserve to lose.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially with the defense that they have, like if the defense is giving you the ball back, you got to take advantage. You're absolutely right. Those are stolen possessions. Going back to one of the things, though, I didn't mention it, but closing games has still been an issue. I mean, even in their wins, I guess outside of the Giants game, because they were never really up in that game for the most part to begin with. Or at least it was like a back and forth game. The Jets and these Dolphins games, they had double-digit leads, big leads, and couldn't, put their foot on their opponent. That's what I need to see here moving forward, and I think we can segue this kind of into the playoff picture conversation, because Falcons are right back in it at 3-3 for that 6th or 7th seed in the NFC, and I think it's going to be a very entertaining race. I mean, you got New Orleans at 3-2 playing on Monday night tonight against the 2-4 Seahawks, who are still kind of in it. And, I think are just trying to bide their time for when Russell Wilson comes back, I guess projected after, their week 9 bye. He's potentially going to be back in week 10. You got Minnesota at 3-3, and then Falcons obviously at 3-3. And then, the 49ers just dropped to 2-4. I feel like that's going to be the meat of this race. Now, obviously, Carolina can get back in, especially if they win against Atlanta. And Chicago, I think, is fading. And, I just think they're a mess. And I think they're going to continue to be a mess until Matt Nagy's out of there in Chicago. So I'm kind of writing them off. But, again, Falcons are in it. They're competing for 2 spots. Right now, I'd say, the betting favorites are New Orleans and Minnesota. I mean, I always like to look at the points for when you look at the standings, and both Minnesota and New Orleans are in the plus. Minnesota's like plus 10, and the Saints are really strong at plus 36, and we'll see if they strengthen that tonight. But you look at some of the schedules of the Saints and the Vikings. I think to start with the Vikings have a much tougher schedule. They got Dallas, they got Baltimore, they got the Chargers, they got the Packers. Those are their next 4 games alone. So that's a murderer's row right there that could kind of knock them off. But, we'll see what they do. I think they'll be competitive in all of those games. I think they've had some bad luck and potentially, like the Falcons, maybe should be 4-2 right now. But again, going back to my point from before, you got to see the Falcons kind of put their foot on their opponent when they got them down. And to this point, they haven't yet. The defense is, by and large what we thought they'd be. and the offense is starting to get like what we thought they'd be. And, they're going to continue to be forced to win games and score 30 points was, a game, which is a tough ask of any team. So again, hoping the defense can they did it at times early in the season, with the Giants game and, even the Bucks game and the Eagles game. I mean, they made stops, but it got to a certain point where the offense was just kind of like Carolina right now, just slowing them down. But what are you thinking right now, playoff wise? Do you think there's a legitimate shot, or you still kind of taking a wait and see approach?
I think there's a shot, just because the NFC is not as really just not as good as I thought it would be.
I think it's top heavy. I mean,
yeah,
you got those 5 teams that have separated themselves from the pack. I think the Super Bowl contender is going to come out of one of those 5 teams. But again,
the Saints, I'm not like the Saints aren't that good this year. The Seahawks, Seahawks are not good this year. Who's another team that we've really expected? I mean, even Carolina, I thought they were frisky for a while. They're not good this year.
Yeah. What did you think of San Francisco going in the season?
I was just about to say San Francisco, not good this year. I thought healthy they would be back to form, back to being like a contender. And, that really opens the door, especially when you talk about the Falcons. They have a pretty easy schedule. Granted, they've already blown 2 pretty winnable games on that easy schedule. But, and it's one of those things to where, last year you had the matchup with the Chiefs. It's like, I wish we could have played them this year, instead of the Bills. But there's a lot of winnable games left on the schedule. I don't think the Falcons are by any means out of it.
You look at their next 5 opponents. I mean, they got this Carolina game, then they go to New Orleans, which again, I mean, it's all right in front of themselves against, 2 contenders or 2 teams that are in the mix. Then the third game, you got at Dallas. I think we'd all probably expect, unfortunately, because it's the Dan Quinn revenge game, you'd like to see a win, but I think Dallas is really strong. I think they're going to be competing for that 1 seed in the postseason. So I'm going to probably chalk that up to as an L. And then you got New England on Thursday Night Football on a short week at home, and then at Jacksonville. Yeah. So really, I mean, there's 4 winnable games of that 5 stretch. I'd be happy with 3-2. I still think that would put them on the right track to still get 10-7, because again, their remaining stretch, I mean, they'll play Carolina again. They'll play New Orleans again. Unfortunately, they got to play Tampa. They got the Bills. So Tampa and Buffalo, I think you probably chalk those up as losses. But
is the Bills going to be the classic game that the Falcons are just should not even be close to hanging?
One of them.
San Francisco, Kansas City. It's always week 15. Well, now 16, I guess. But
yeah, and again, the thing about that game is you're going to Buffalo in January. The run game needs to be much better than it is. I don't think it's going to be a great time to be slinging the ball 40 times a game like Matt Ryan has been the last couple of weeks. You want to get that number down to the low 30s.
And you talk about hanging on to leads, and I admire what Arthur Smith is trying to do. He's trying to do the smart thing. He's trying to get 4 yards of carry until the clock hits 0, which is better than throwing 3 incomplete.
Yeah.
Pass. So I'm not going to work every time. You got to have some sort of bag that you can go to.
Right. And again, they executed on that this past week. And again, when they needed to, they got it. So there's the positive there, but you just like to see some pressure taken off a little bit more. I mean, I think we talked about it in the off season. That was one of the draws to Arthur Smith, was his work in the run game, taking more pressure off of Matt Ryan. The pressure is still on Matt Ryan, and thankfully he's delivered like he's capable of. But they really do need to get this run game going a little bit more, and I'm hopeful for it. But yeah, but going back to the bigger picture again, I think 10-7 is still in play. I mean, you take care of both Carolina games, that's key. You split against New Orleans. I know there's a potential that you can win both, but I think splitting is more reasonable. And then, you're losing both to Tampa Bay. You're losing the Dallas one, and you're losing to the Buffalo one. And there you go, 10-7. We didn't talk about it, but at Jacksonville is the 5th game in this next 5-game stretch. I think that's, a very foreseeable win as well. So
I think I mean, even in this stretch we talk about, I mean, even 2-3 isn't that horrible. You talk about one of Carolina, New England, New Orleans, and Jacksonville. You got to come away with two of those. And you're at least
Yeah.
treading water if you come away with two of those with a chance to have your back against the wall and make a push at the playoffs. Like I said, with everybody else being fairly mediocre at this point, I don't think that's the worst thing that could happen, but I think they could absolutely do better.
Yeah, no, I think the way you put it, backs against the wall. If they only win 2 of their next 5, that's kind of the situation they'd be in. The margin for
They'd be
error
at
is
500,
0.
right? No, they would be one game below 500.
They'd be 5-6, and again, you'd probably be hoping for like a 9-8 to slip in as the 7 seed, or again, you get one of those surprise games and you upset the Bills, which
but you're gonna have to talk about beating multiple very good teams if you're going to do that.
Yeah, especially beating them in Buffalo. I think that's a tough ask. But 9-8, I think if they got to that point, again, there's a possibility of getting the 7 seed. But if they were 9-8, I think a lot of people would probably consider that kind of a successful season in year 1 of Arthur Smith. And then you kind of hope, the wheels are in motion, and you have another great draft class.
I think 9-8 can get you in the playoffs, man. The Saints are the yo-yo team of the year this year.
Chicago did it last year at 8-8, and again, this NFC, it's top heavy, and then there's a bunch of kind of mediocre teams right now, and the Falcons are part of that bunch, and we're hoping they continue to show progress. And I think the progress you want to see, because right now
they're trending in the right direction, and a lot of are trending in the wrong direction. I think that's the thing.
Yeah, no, and you'd rather be in the Falcons' position right now than a team like Carolina and Chicago that, again, are trending in the wrong direction. But again, you just want to see the combined record of their opponents they beat, and we can't sugarcoat it. It's 4-16. I mean, they haven't really beaten anybody great. And again, there's not a lot of great teams left on the schedule, so that's good news. And you can only play the teams that are on your schedule. But I just want to. It's how they win their games. And right now, it's a little too close for comfort. You want to see them and they talk about situational football. You want to see them in that situational football, kind of answer the call and really just, again, finish the game. They're these game-winning drives are not super sustainable. It's great because we haven't seen a lot of them in a while. So you thought that the odds were going to say Matt Ryan was going to have a couple more of them after kind of starting his career, rattling them all off like every other week, it seemed like. But you can't, sustainably win games in the NFL that way. You got to eventually, kind of beat down your opponent. We saw a lot of teams this week do that. There's a lot of blowouts. I want to see them kind of, Carolina's fading. They're kind of like against the ropes right now. You can hit a knockout punch right now and really kind of, put them down. And then, potentially they're looking at PJ Walker. They're really considering Deshaun Watson. And even if they make that Deshaun Watson trade, I don't think he's not playing this year. There's just that dark cloud.
Roger Goodell will not allow that to happen. I know everybody keeps talking about it, and that's fine. I really don't care what other people talk about. It's one of those things where like Roger Goodell is going to step in and he's going to say he's not playing.
Yeah. And I think one thing, I don't know if it was Florio, but he pointed out, Deshaun Watson's on paid leave, that's the reason that he's not on the commissioner's exempt list right now. So if a team were to trade for him, like the Panthers, I don't think he'd be on paid leave anymore. So then Roger Goodell has to make a decision. Do I have to put this guy on the commissioner exempt list? Which, I believe you're right. He would. And then again, he's not playing until these matters get resolved, which, you would know better than me, studying law. I mean, could take a while, right? So, regardless of whether they take the big swing and get him, I still think the Panthers are going to be in a very precarious position moving forward if they don't get better quarterback play. So again, Falcons, you got an opportunity here. Hit the knockout punch, knock out a contender for good, get yourself 3-game win streak, and then you got a really big test in New Orleans to potentially kind of be in the driver's seat for that 6th seed. Say that again.
Love to be 4-1 over the last 5 going into New Orleans.
That would be great. It makes you feel good about yourself. Makes you feel warm and fuzzy going into Saints week. I'm sure that'll be a fun show here. But anything else you want to add about this upcoming matchup, about the Falcons? Got anything?
I don't think I have anything. I was going to talk about Tommy Trimble, but I mean, he's a
Yeah,
Black
underrated guy. Underrated player. I mean, if we're talking fantasy, he'd be that. If you need to stream
Oh,
a tight end.
I said the Falcons should consider double dipping on tight end and getting him too, but people would have riot.
Oh, I would have. I'd be for it. I've been wanting. I mean, again, Hayden Hurst has left a little bit to desire, but I'll probably be championing a tight end in the upcoming draft. I mean, people will probably call me crazy.
2 years, Brock Bowers.
What about Big O? What's his name?
Oh, but yeah, Darnell Washington. He wouldn't be a bad
Can you
one.
imagine? Where's he going to go in the draft? What's his futures look like?
He's had some injury problems. I haven't seen anything on like his draft stock in particular, but I think he's actually, I think he's a sophomore. I'm like 99% sure.
Well, yeah. So he's got, no, I knew he wasn't going to be eligible this year. But the guy that you just talked about, Powers, he's a sophomore too, right?
No, he's a true freshman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Darnell Washington's a sophomore, so he would probably take another year.
Can you imagine, Kyle Pitts split out wide to one side, and what does Washington run a fast 40, or is he like a 4.8, 4.9 guy?
He's a freak. He's fast. He's 6'7",
can you imagine?
And he runs like he's half that size.
Can you imagine one on one side, one on the other side?
Yeah, I know Eric always talks about like, oh, the Falcons don't have to draft Georgia players, yada yada. Half of their defense could probably start on the Falcons right now. Yeah,
so. I'm usually with Eric on that, but the way Georgia's been trending and the way their recruiting's been, I mean, they do have like pick your position. Here's your NFL caliber player, pretty much. It's getting to that point where I'd be okay with it, and certainly, again, the way Kyle Pitts is, if you remember, like Michael Vick when he came in the league, the Panthers drafted Thomas Davis solely to defend against Michael Vick. And I think you're going to see that now again. History repeat itself with some of these NFC South foes, or just NFC foes in general. Be like, hey, we got to guard against a guy like Kyle Pitts. We need an answer. We need like a Kyle Hamilton, I guess, or someone to defend it. I think he's going to change the way, because you're splitting them out wide. You're putting them in positions you don't usually see guys that big and that fast. And if the Falcons could add a guy like Washington, who's maybe not as freaky, but still very freaky, hopefully we're at the point where we can take a luxury pick like that on, I don't know, day 2 maybe. But he's probably a round 1 guy if he continues to do some of the things he's done. But that's for a conversation for another day.
Speaking of which, Mock Draft Monday came out yesterday. I guess this will be out tomorrow. It came out yesterday. We got George Karlaftis, Kenneth Walker III. Just mixing up the picks. Got a couple different names in there.
What draft pick did you have him at?
They're at 17 right now.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, we talked about Karlaftis last week. If they're in that spot and you can get a pass rusher like him or Aiden Hutchinson, I think that's like, if you're asking me what best case scenario is on October 25th, something like that. Because I think, edge rusher or cornerback 2.
A lot of good corners, yeah.
Yeah, edge rusher or cornerback 2. Those are the target spots, I think, in round 1 for me right now. But
definitely,
again, things can change. We'll see what happens, but I don't know if that's going to change. Just based on free agency is going to be, they're not going to be able to fill that hole in free agency. That's for sure. So make sure you check that out. Make sure you check all the content out. sportstalkatl.com. They'll have a lot of Falcon stuff. Also, they'll have you covered on the Braves. Obviously, very exciting time. So, and then they'll also have the Hawk stuff and among other things. So, again, make sure you're checking that on the site. Make sure you're, again, as always, subscribing to the YouTube channel. We usually throw this up on there a day or so later. Subscribe to the podcast. Leave us 5-star reviews. We'd really appreciate it. So for Jake Gordon, I'm Matt Karoly. This has been another edition of Talking Birdie. Go Falcons.